Something that I say along the way will touch you. I know it. Let's begin that process of crafting a meaningful life.
Here's Mary Crafts.
Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I'm your host, Mary Crafts, and every single week that I have a guest, other than just me talking, I have them for a reason, and there's something that they hold that I want to share with all of you, my listeners. One of the probably most prolific topics that I talk about is this concept of fear, releasing fear, recognizing it, seeing it. What have we put in place of fear that has kept us from even seeing it in our lives? What is the answer to it? What is the real emotion? Well, certainly fear is a real emotion, but we don't want to live there. The other day I was scrolling through, I can't remember, I think it was Facebook. And I saw a post by a friend of mine, Curtis Morley, and I went, oh my gosh, I have to have Curtis on my show, because he put into 2 words what I've been trying to talk about for now 5 years about emotions and letting the good emotions lead our life and releasing the other ones. And welcome, Curtis. This is Curtis Morley, and I'm so happy to have you with me today.
I'm so excited to be here, Mary. Thank you so much for having me on.
So you and I have known each other for a long time. And how is it that I didn't know that this was your big forte, something called counterfeit emotions? Is this recent for you, or like, where has this been?
Yeah, it's probably because I didn't know it. And and until a few years ago, you're aware I wrote the Entrepreneur's Paradox, the Wall Street Journal bestseller, and my focus my whole life has been entrepreneurship and coaching and mentoring entrepreneurs, and that's what I've done. I still do that. I still help entrepreneurs go from basement to buyout. And a couple of years ago, I had a dramatic shift, something I did not expect. One part of that is I went through a really hard divorce, and Mary,
I remember.
I needed to change. I did. I needed to become a new Curtis, and through that, I was able to learn some really hard lessons, life lessons, the hard way, and I'm so grateful I did.
Trust me, those life lessons aren't learned any other way than the hard way.
Right. And when the Entrepreneur's Paradox, when it hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, I was talking with the publisher, talking to my editor, and they said, "Hey, let's do a 3-book series." And I said, "Fantastic, let's do it." Yeah. And so I started writing my second book, which is called The Timeline of Business, which the idea is that not only do entrepreneurs make all the same mistakes, they make them actually at the same time. And so there's actually a timeline. If you tell me where you're at in business, I can tell you what's coming next.
Retired. I'm retired.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And so I started writing that book. And if it's okay that I get a little personal here, I started writing that book, and my dear friend all the way back from college, his name is Jerry Williamson. I think it's important to say his name. He took his life. And I'm not okay with that, Mary. It still hurts today. It still hurts. And I called my publisher up. I said, "Hey, I need to push pause. I need to write a very different book." And all of the experiences of the years of me becoming a different Curtis, me becoming a better version of myself, all of the journal entries and everything that I'd been keeping, it all came into this one point where I said, I need to write a book called Counterfeit Emotions. Because I truly believe if my friend Jerry had understood the difference between guilt and shame, and had understood the difference between the authentic emotion of pain and misery, I think if he would have just those two, there's multiple dyads in the counterfeit emotions, but if he just had understood those two, I truly believe he'd still be here today.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So obviously, this was personal experiences that led you to make a shift in the direction of your career and the direction of your focus. And how did you come to this point, though, of understanding the counterfeit emotions that we live by?
It it really came down like I said, there's 33 different dyads or pairings. And I guess to give a kind of a context to the discussion, the idea is that every authentic emotion has a counterfeit except for one. There's one single emotion that has no counterfeit, and that emotion is peace. And
Ah,
and every other emotion has an emotion that looks and acts and feels like it. It puts on the clothing of that emotion and masquerades as if it were that emotion, and it's not. And instead, it creates destructive patterns of disconnection in our lives. And one that's super fun is the dyad of nice versus kind.
when
That's
I
what.
saw that on your bio sheet, I just laughed out loud. Uh, that's the perfect example.
Yeah, because nice, it turns out, is not that nice. It's
Yeah.
really not. And so I've actually on October 16th, we're doing a master class of how to get out of being the nice guy and into being kind. And it's transformational. It's so neat. But to go
Uh,
back to your question of, how did this come about? There was two things that happened in my life. My divorce was it was crushing. It was
a
it
big
was
one. Yeah.
so hard, um and I had the belief inside of me my whole life that pain was bad. I had the belief that
Uh,
I was feeling pain, that either I was bad, that my choices were bad, that my situation was bad, that something was bad. And I believe there was a spectrum. Like if this is the spectrum, I believe pain was over here and joy was over here. And here's the middle mark. And these two were completely exclusive. You could not have pain and joy. That was my belief. My belief was that pain and joy don't exist in the same universe. If you have pain, you don't have joy. And if you have joy, you don't have pain. And so whenever I felt pain, I thought, oh, I must not be able to have joy. What I realized was that I was labeling pain as its counterfeit. And
yeah.
pain's counterfeit is misery.
Yeah.
And misery is on this side of the spectrum. Joy and love are on this side of the spectrum. But the beautiful part is that pain gets to be on whichever side we place it. I can
Ah,
experience pain and joy at the exact same moment. And if I decide to be a victim, I can experience pain and misery at the same time as well. Pain slides on the spectrum, but misery and joy, they are exclusive.
they
We
are.
cannot experience misery and joy together at the same time.
I have seen that so much in my own life, Curtis. I'm in the middle of dealing with something that I didn't think I would ever deal with in my life of being betrayed by a friend and that she used and abused me to make contacts throughout my network. And so I was feeling a lot of pain from this.
Mm,
But yet, as I think back on this last week, it wasn't misery. And I think the distinction between that was even in the midst of my pain, I could see the positive outcome of this, the lessons that I was going to be learning,
mm,
of how not to have this happen, of how that there's still good work to be done and don't throw away, just so many things that allowed me to experience that pain, but not misery because I could see the good coming.
mm.
Yeah.
I love that, Mary.
That's a great way to describe that. I love that.
I wrote an article for Inc. magazine, and it's called From Victim to Victor to Vessel.
I love that. Say those again. It's
From victim to victor to vessel. It's just, it's so wonderful. And oftentimes we choose misery, and misery is the state of being a victim. Misery is based in blame and shame. Misery is us saying this one phrase. And if you ever hear yourself say this, you can know that you are automatically in a state of victim. And that phrase is, why did this happen to me? Specifically the words to me. Because when I was going through some of the hardest parts of my divorce, I sat down with a good friend at lunch, and he said, I was telling him about the divorce, and he could tell I was in victim. I was, Mary. I was so in victim. And
stuck in that victimville place.
Oh, I was there. It. I was putting a mortgage down on a house in Victim Town. I was so there. And he said, Curtis, life doesn't happen to you. Life happens for you.
That concept is truly an infinite and eternal concept of how we can experience life.
Yeah. And it was amazing because I felt my brain transform at that moment. I said, wow, what is happening for me in this situation? Why is this happening for me? Instead of why is this happening to me? Why is this happening for me? And then after years of study and transforming myself, I realized there was actually a third phase, not just why is this happening to me to why is this happening for me? There's another level, and that's how can this happen through me? And when we realize that life can happen through us, that's where we become a vessel. That's where we become that person that can be used from the divine to be able to say, not only is this happening for me, but this can happen for others as well. My experience can benefit others. My hard times can help others. And so understanding that principle of victim, victor, and vessel is so important in the healing process. Because one thing I've learned is that no one heals as a victim. No one heals as a victim.
That is the favorite part from my book, when the title of the chapter is The Healing Starts When the Hiding Stops. And as long as we are living in that hiding place of not wanting to be seen and feeling that we cannot be vulnerable because it's too painful there, that we cannot heal. And I think the same thing happens with victim. As long as we stay in that victim state, there's no healing there. And as long as you stay living in fear, there's no healing there. That the joy lives on the other side of all of those emotions.
I love that you have that chapter in your book, Mary. I love that that's such an important part to you and that you're sharing that with others. You're a vessel.
Yeah.
You're a vessel in that way.
Thank you.
Sharing what the hard life lessons you've learned with others so that they can be benefited, they can learn, they can grow.
It is not always easy to be completely vulnerable and what I call emotionally naked, but it is always the most rewarding in the end. Sometimes you can't see that sometimes when you're in the middle of it, but always it's the most rewarding. Anytime you take a step towards authenticity, that's where the joy lies. There's no misery in authenticity. Sometimes a little pain, but never misery, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the meat of counterfeit emotions. So how do people recognize in themselves counterfeit emotions?
Oh, yes, this is the perfect question. You have identified exactly what needs to be known is there's four criteria. There's four criteria to understand if an emotion is authentic or if an emotion is counterfeit. And the first of those is connection. And connection, it turns out, is one of the basic human needs of life.
Yes.
There's food, water, shelter, clothing, and connection. And you look at what happens in hospitals when a child is born.
Right.
As soon as they check out the baby and make sure the baby's okay, the very first thing they do is they put it on the mother's chest.
Yeah.
For that connection. And within connection, there's four things that authentic emotions connect us to. The first is self. Does this emotion connect me to me? The second is God. Does it connect me to God? Then does it connect me to others? And finally, does it connect me to the truth? Does this emotion connect me? And just like you talked about with shame, guilt is the authentic emotion. Shame is the counterfeit of guilt. And shame is one of the biggest disconnectors we can ever experience
Absolutely.
in life. Just like you were talking about hiding. Shame says to hide. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am wrong. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame says, my existence, my whole being is a mistake.
Yeah.
And understanding that difference, is really gets us to that connection. Shame disconnects. Guilt actually connects us. Like you think about, let's say I hurt you in some way, Mary. Let's say I stole your beautiful salmon covered scarf, and you were upset, right? And
Actually, you shouldn't steal it. I'd just give it to you.
Okay, perfect. But guilt connects me to me. Guilt says, Curtis, you're not the kind of person that does that. You're not that kind of person. And then it connects me to God and says, God, I'm sorry I did this to Mary. And then it connects me to you. And it says, Mary, I'm bringing your scarf back. And guess what? I'm bringing a plate of cookies too, because I love you. And I'm sorry I did this. And guilt connects us with the truth as well. Where shame does the exact opposite. Shame is the ultimate disconnector. Instead of guilt saying, make Mary whole, repay Mary, make her whole. Shame says, no, disconnect from Mary, put her over here. Mary's over there, I'm over here. I no longer am friends with Mary because either she's wrong for wearing a salmon colored scarf or and shame pulls me away from you. And it pulls me away from the divinity inside myself too. And it's fascinating. Brene Brown's research on guilt and shame, as well as a study out of Sweden, shows that shame is one of the lowest emotions we can feel. As far as the frequency scale, shame is one of the lowest emotions we can feel, whereas guilt actually is the opposite. Shame gets us, there's a direct correlation between shame and suicide, shame and drug use, shame and bullying, shame and teenage pregnancy. All of these destructive behaviors, shame is directly correlated. And most studies throughout centuries have stopped there. They just looked at shame. This actually goes into guilt as well. And it turns out guilt has an inverse relationship with all of those behaviors. Guilt is the way out of suicidal ideation. Guilt is the way out of drug addiction. Guilt is the way out because guilt connects. It's such a beautiful, healthy emotion. And most people, especially in today's world, most people are like, oh, don't let them guilt you. Oh, that's such a guilt trip. And they are using guilt as if it were shame. Guilt is healthy. If you look at the etymology of the word guilt, it goes all the way back to Old English, the word gilden, which means to repay or to make whole. The feeling of guilt is the feeling to make whole. If I steal your scarf, then that feeling is to make Mary whole by giving her scarf back and a plate of
Or
cookies.
perhaps a new Gucci one or something. I'm just
Or
saying.
yeah, that's so perfect for you, Mary. That's
Okay, can I just say I have wrestled with both of those emotions before, and I've written and talked about both of them. I've never heard it quite so succinct. I've read Brene Brown. You just opened up a window of clarity for me, Curtis. If your book and your masterclass, if that's just a piece of it, it will be worth anybody's time and energy to do this. I had always felt that both of those words were on the negative side. And as you started talking, I started thinking of my own life and things that I'm ashamed of or ashamed about me are the things I hide and don't
yes,
bring me to the best version of me. And
yes,
then I
your
started
authentic self.
thinking about guilt and how is that any different than shame? Well, guilt is an action word. And that
Yes.
if I feel guilty about something, it moves me to action, to repair, to replace, to heal. Because I don't want to live in guilt. I don't want others to live in guilt. So it moves me to action. Shame moves me to hiding. But we oftentimes use those words interchangeably and at the same time.
And that's why counterfeit emotions are so dangerous, is because they're sneaky.
Oh,
They're these
sneaky.
sneaky
Yeah.
emotions that they when we're growing up, we're taught opposite emotions. We're taught, here's love, here's hate. Love people, don't hate them. And because they're on the opposite end of the spectrum, it's really easy to see. The sneaky ones are those emotions that slide right up to that original or authentic emotion and say, no, 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 don't pay attention to that emotion. Pay attention to me. Pay attention to shame. I'm the one that you want to hold on to. And and that's why they're so dangerous, is because they're the marauders, the masqueraders of the original or the authentic emotion. And it goes through, we talked about a couple of the criteria, connection and direction, or direction is the next one, is every one of the authentic emotion, this plays out true on every single one. They either lead us forward, they lead us upward, or they bring us together. So every authentic emotion, it takes us somewhere.
Uh-huh.
So here, say this with me. You know the common saying for pain, right? No pain,
No gain.
no, right? Why? Because pain takes us somewhere. Pain moves us forward. It takes us somewhere. Misery, what's the saying for misery? Misery
Like
loves
company.
Misery loves company, because the direction for every one of the counterfeit emotions is simply back to that emotion. Misery dies unless we have more misery. That's why misery loves company. It wants to sit there in blame and shame and say, oh, I hate this person. Come hate them with me. Come be miserable with me. And that's the only way it survives. If misery doesn't have more of itself, it naturally just dies. But pain, it takes us somewhere. Pain elevates us. It moves us into a direction of growth. Misery, it just spins on itself. And that's the direction of all the counterfeit emotions, is they just spin. And if you look at it from the top, it's a circle. If you bring it up in 3D, it spins, but every rotation gets a little bit lower. And that's the direction. So that's the second criteria to know if you're feeling an authentic emotion or if you're feeling it's counterfeit.
So where do you think these counterfeit emotions come from? I mean, are they like from our childhood? I mean, and the ability to recognize them? We weren't born with counterfeit emotions, I don't believe. Where'd they come from?
This is such a great question. One thing I've learned in my own journey is that there's no such thing as a bad emotion. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. Every single emotion we receive is a gift. And I've got my little gift bag here. Here's my little gift bag. Every single emotion we receive is a gift. And sometimes those emotions are hard. Sometimes we don't like those emotions. And of all the authentic emotions, there's only two that are not meant to be held. They're meant to be felt, but they're not meant to be held.
Okay.
And that's guilt and pain.
Ah,
Guilt and pain are meant to be felt. They're meant to wash through us. They're meant to hurt. And then they're meant to be released. And every emotion we have, there's no such thing as a bad emotion because every emotion we have, even the counterfeits, are messengers. Every emotion we have is a messenger. So we get this gift, I like to call triggers gifts. And inside this gift, we have the choice. Are we going to pull it out of the gift bag? Are we going to pull the bow off? Are we going to open up the package and see what's inside? And oftentimes we don't. And Mary, if I get personal again, when I was growing up, I thought that pain was bad, and so I would just jam it into that steel box in my heart, and I would clamp it down so tight, and I said, no, I'm not going to feel that pain. I'm not going to experience that. I'm just going to clamp it down in my heart. And pain is not meant to be held. And that's exactly what I was doing, is this gift would come in and I would jam that pain, that gift in the form of pain into my heart, and I would try and lock it down and hold it. It's not meant for that. It's meant to wash through us. It's meant to hurt so that we take action on it.
I love that.
And
the action piece is one of the critical pieces.
yeah. And if we'll spend enough time to unwrap the gift and look inside, what we find is that we find growth. We find this beautiful, beautiful experience called growth, but we have to be willing to unwrap the gift. We have to be willing to say, you know what? I'm going to sit with this pain. I'm going to actually feel it. I'm going to let the pain drip out of my eyes. Because pain is not meant to be held. It's meant to be felt.
Curtis, when I think about different things that I have experienced in my life, and now at this age of 70, I can say, thank you. Every single one of them brought me to where I am today. And I wouldn't have lived life without them. But sometimes when we have that bag, and someone's given us a bag, I think about what keeps us from opening it. And 99.9% of the time, it seems that fear keeps us from opening the bag. We're afraid to look, afraid what's in there, afraid the consequences, afraid that we aren't enough to deal with whatever's in the bag. How do you feel fear plays into your thought process?
I love that you asked that question, Mary, because it is such a transcendent question. It truly is. That why don't we open the gift? And it's because we're scared of what we're going to find inside. Yeah. We're afraid. We've got that fear. And fear, it's amazing because as I went through and I started to identify all of the counterfeits and their and the authentics and then their counterparts, I came to fear. And I thought, wait a minute, this one is different. This one is different than all the rest. Because if you line up fear, what is it really counterfeiting? Fear is a manifestation of the future that you don't want. It's you are creating a future you don't want with fear. And its authentic counterpart is faith. And I thought, wait a minute, that seems almost opposite. But if you look at it, faith is a belief in things unseen, a belief in things hoped for that are true. Fear is false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
FEAR,
I
false
love that
evidence.
acronym. Yeah.
It's the exact same as faith. Faith creates a future you do want. Fear creates a future you don't want. And fear can be so paralyzing. Fear can be so paralyzing. And you're exactly right. That's why we don't open the gift. That's why we don't open the gift, to be able to say, okay, I realize I have to be accountable for this. I have to realize what's going on inside of me. And that kind of hurts sometimes. Actually, a lot of times.
For me, this releasing of fear has been so much a part of my journey. And I was 50, Curtis, before I realized that fear was running my life. Every decision that I was making in my life was made from the point and perspective of fear. And it was a long process to begin to release that and to let that go. And what did I put in its place? And recognize I was a master manipulator of myself and keeping the fear from my vision. And like, that's not fear, that's something else. And that's really this, or that's over here, you know. But when I finally have been able to let go of that
Yeah.
and embrace life like that, it's transformative. And now in my morning meditations and times, I actually do a figure 8, the sign of infinity, with my hands. And I do this. I release the pain and the fears of the past. And I embrace the joy of the future. And I just stand there and I just do this figure 8 in my mind, which brings me back to the intersection point, which is now. The past, the future, and now. Because the now for me is the most important moment in my entire life. And then, well, today, right now is the most important. Well, no, right now is the most important. But it's continually to refresh the page. Just like on our computers, when we refresh the now all the time, that keep us focused on, what am I choosing? What do I want? What am I drawing in? Now, right now. And as I think about this concept of counterfeit emotions, I cannot wait to read the book. I want to sign up for the masterclass because I would like to be able to recognize those in my life all the time, in present time, in the now. It's one thing to see them in the past. It's one thing to think about them in the future. And it's a whole different thing to experience them in the now. So if I were to sign up for your masterclass, tell me what would be happening. What would I be looking at? What's going on and how long is it and blah, blah, blah.
So it is very specifically 21 days.
Okay.
So it's a 21-day masterclass. And the reason why is because humans are creatures of habits.
And
We
that's
all
how
are
long it
creatures
takes.
of habits. That's how long it takes to break a habit. And so my next masterclass is nice versus kind. And it turns out nice is actually the counterfeit of kind. And it's so easy to be the nice guy or the nice girl and live our lives placating and being the doormat and not speaking our truth. Kind doesn't do that. Kind leans in. Nice leans out, but it does it with a smile. It's got this great big smile.
Nice.
And I'm way back here and I'm so happy. But kind is willing to lean in. Kind is willing to have the hard conversation and speak truth and do it in a loving way. And so the master class, it's 21 days and it's a hybrid course where we do live phone calls, we do a daily activities, and it's very unique because it's not a class about learning. We don't do this master class about learning. It's a class about becoming. It's a transformative experience where every single day there are activities that get you way out of your comfort zone, and it's about unwrapping the gifts
Yes.
and
Did I need to give you my
under,
address of where to send that? I mean, just
it's amazing. And one thing that's very unique about the masterclass is that it is that hybrid, but we also do peer calls. So every single
ah,
day in the masterclass, there's you're assigned to a group of others that are going through the same experience and you can talk to and relate with. And it's so fun because at the end, there's all sorts of new best friends that everybody has, and it's just a really neat experience that is probably the best word I can describe it is transformative.
yeah.
Is it changes people. One amazing gal that took the class, she sadly she was part of an abusive relationship, and she was nice. She played the nice girl, and she placated, and she was the doormat, and she,
Oh,
did all
yeah.
these things. And again, if you remember the direction of counterfeit emotions, nice, the more nice you are, the more nice you have to be. It goes in that circle of I just have to be more and more nice. And nice is actually very manipulative.
Yeah.
Nice is I'm going to do this for you. And I just created a covert contract. You don't know about this contract, but because I was no, nice to you, now I'm expecting something back in return.
Uh,
And yeah, it's amazingly manipulative. And there's a 5-step process of getting out of being nice and into kind. And it is so beautiful, Mary. It is such a beautiful experience.
when I think about nice, nice, like you were saying, is a distancer. It keeps people at arm's length.
Yes.
It keeps them from
Yeah.
coming in close because there's no pull in the emotion. Whereas kind, it's just the opposite. It pulls you in. You sense their energy.
Mhm.
They're all about being next to you. And they care. They care about you when they look at you. You sense that they
Yeah.
want something more with you. And that's a connection. Nothing more.
Yeah.
I see you. I, I just think this is going to be transformative for everyone. How are you going to share this message with the world? What are the plans?
So, along with the master classes, I'm writing the book, of course, and I plan to either launch that next May, which is Mental Health Awareness
Right.
Month, or the following May. Everyone that is part of my Facebook group, the Counterfeit Emotions Facebook group, and that signs up for a masterclass, I actually I'm giving them pre-read chapters so they can actually get the book ahead of time and they can be part of that, which is super fun. And so, yeah, my goal is to help as many people as I can transform into finding their authentic self so that they can find that one emotion that has no counterfeit, and that's peace.
And what if you drop your stone in the pond and the ripple effect begins? But then, as you look beyond, you see every one of those ripples dropping in their stones. Everyone that you have touched. The effect is massive. And I can't think of anyone I'd rather see take this than you. Because I experience you, Curtis, as an authentic person and a person who truly has a heart of care. And I love that about you. I'm just so happy that you're my friend.
Thank you so much, Mary.
And so
Thank
the
you.
book is not available now, but if they join your Facebook group, which is called what?
Counterfeit Emotions.
Counterfeit Emotions. And we'll have those links for you at the end of the show. And then the masterclass is happening, though, right away, October 16th.
October 16th. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that we can begin this transformation process right away so that each of my listeners can become their own pebble that's dropped in the pond. I always like that. I always like to be able to give my listeners a way to move forward. That it's not just fun to listen to Mary for a half hour, and we've been way more than a half hour, but that it is actually transformative. And I try and give people a post-it note message moment at the end of every podcast. So this is what was a huge thing that helped transform my life. And my post-it note said, "What would I do today if I were no longer afraid?" And that was on my mirror for 10 years. Sometimes I had to change it because the cleaning lady messed it up or whatever. But every day and every night I asked myself that. I would think through my day, things I normally would just not go to or pass me by, and then I would like, well, that's what I'm going to do today because I am no longer afraid. And so these post-it notes that I have people put on their mirror about counterfeit emotions. Now, this week, their post-it note will be about counterfeit emotions. What do you think is the best thing for them to put on their post-it note? You weren't expecting that question, huh?
No, I wasn't. Let me put my brain to it. Yeah, as I think about the different dyads, like surrender and resignation. Surrender being authentic and resignation being the counterfeit. I think about belonging versus fitting in, and think about how belonging is about self. Fitting in is about trying to be like others. And that's actually our next masterclass after kind versus nice, is belonging versus fitting in. With all of those, I would say, live your authentic self. Put that on your post-it note, is to live your authentic self, live intentionally, and unwrap every gift that comes to you.
I love that. So listeners, your post-it note this week is live your authentic self. No more counterfeit emotions. All right. Curtis, thank you for being here. Thank you for shedding your light. I feel like a big beam has just opened up above me as I thought about so many things, just the little thing of shame versus guilt. I'm grateful for the gift that you opened up. I'm grateful that you claimed it and you let go of fear enough to look inside. Thank you for being here. And everyone, look to the end of the podcast for how to sign up for the masterclass and how to be part of his book coming out on his Facebook thing. And if you want to follow him on his Facebook or Instagram, we'll also include those links because it's fun just to get to know Curtis, this incredible man. Thank you, Curtis. Thank you so much.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.